In this next part of the process, I'm going to be cleaning some of the little flakes in the gold leaf here. So I've given that size time to cure, and I'm going to take a nice, extremely soft, large brush, and I'm very gently just going to brush that surface just to get all of those little flakes of gold off. There we go. So any edges that are sticking up, that's going to get all of those down. And it looks like everything took very well. I don't have any visible holes or cracks that would need to be corrected at this point. So everything's looking really nice. And when you go through this process, it almost is like the gold is just dissolving and melding into a nice solid sheet. And that solidity kind of gives the impression that this is just a solid sheet of gold, a solid thick sheet of gold, even though it's made up of several sheets, just a micron or two thick of gold leaf. We want that real profound solidity there. So I didn't have a lot of gold flakes. If I had a lot of gold flakes, I might have tried to collect them to use just in spot treatments on different projects, or to make shell gold, which is a gold watercolor. But I really didn't have big enough chunks to really bother with. But I really like how that turned out. So the last thing I'm going to do here is clean that gold that did adhere to the gesso. And to do that, I'm going to use this tool here called a paint eraser. And it's just a rubber tool. It doesn't work like an eraser where I'm trying to, take rubber off. I'm just going to dip it in water here. And anywhere where I have gold on my gesso, I'm just going to rub it with the water in this paint eraser, and it just dissolves that gold right away. So I want these edges to be nice and clean. This will actually help me getting a nice clean painted edge later when I go to paint. So it's just a matter of cleaning up all those little edges. And because there's no size on the gesso, it's only on the clay bowl, the gold just comes right off. And if it discolors a little bit, you could just take a cotton ball and wipe off that wet gold dust. But I don't necessarily mind it. We're going to put many layers of paint, and all of that will be covered. So I'm just going to go around and clean up all of those edges. And there we go. The excess gold is cleaned off, and now our icon is ready to paint on the halo, or the halo line, and the inscriptions. The last stage of the process will be putting in the circle of the halo, the inscriptions, and any decorative elements that you want on your icon. So gold leaf is a wonderful material. It's very, very durable. It repels water. It's the reason why, you know, in the medieval world, in the ancient world, they would actually gild things like the outside of buildings, the domes, the window seals. It's because gold, it repels the weather, but it's also incredibly durable. So if you painted a whole dome, you'll have to repaint that dome, you know, 5 years later. But if you gild the dome, that gilding will last for centuries. So it's incredibly durable, it's incredibly water repellent, which means it's actually rather difficult to paint on. So what we're going to do is, I have some paint here. These are actually acrylic paints that I've added a lot of pigment to make them very rich, very dense paint. But I'm going to add a secret ingredient that's going to make this paint be able to go on the gold leaf much, much better. And that secret ingredient here is a little bit of dish liquid, of soap you would use to wash dishes. And the reason I use that is because it's a detergent. And all detergents, what they actually do is make water more wet. So let me explain that. They decrease the surface tension of water, which means the water can get into, you know, different areas and remove dirt. But that's what we want to do. We want to reduce the surface tension of our paint. So instead of beading up, it'll spread out and stay where we want it on the panel. So I'm just going to use a little bit of that dish liquid and go ahead and mix it into my paint. And it will change the viscosity ever so slightly. So I'm going to go ahead and add some water until it has the fluidity that I want. There we go, that should be good. So I'm going to give it a nice stir. And I'll leave that there for just a moment, maybe just a little bit more water. There we go. So to make this halo circle, I'm actually going to be using my favorite tool here, my ruling pen attachment on my compass. So I'm going to preset that ruling pen to the exact width that I want. And it'll take a while to dial in your ruling pens and kind of get the hang of them. But once you get the hang of this tool, this is absolutely essential. So if you noticed here on my icon, I have a small X. That X is going to mark the center of my halo. So I'm just going to extend my ruling pen out to the radius that I want that halo to be. There we go. Make sure it's not going to touch the hair anywhere. I want it just outside the hair. There. So now my compass is set, and I'm going to load the ruling pen with paint. So I'm going to get some paint on my brush, and I'm going to very gently just brush in that paint. I don't want to put too much because I don't want it to all come out when I go to use the ruling pen. And I'm just going to test just to make sure. Yeah, that seems good. And make my nice red line. And right about there, I'm running out of paint. I don't want to overload my ruling pen, but because it's already preset to the right measurement, as long as I'm very delicate with my pen, and this compass is a very nice compass, so it's not going to change on me. So just reload. Go back to my center of the halo and pick up right where I left off. And on this composition, I'm only going to do a single line. Sometimes I do a double line or a white line on the outside, but for this, we can just use a single line. And there we go. I'm going to go ahead and clean out that ruling pen because I do not want it to dry in there. But I'm going to use this same paint now to go ahead and do the inscriptions. I'm going to switch to, let me go ahead and switch to a micro brush just to make sure that I can make a really fine inscription. And just freehand, I'm going to be very careful not to put my hand in that beautiful line we just made. And I'm going to put the inscription on Christ's right hand side. We have, at least in English, we have I. Put a little diamond in the center of the eye. And an uppercase C, which is a Byzantine sigma. There we go. So those are the first and last letters in Greek of Christ's name, or at least his first name, his proper name, Jesus. And then above that, I'm just going to put a little decorative squiggly line. And this is actually called a titulus. So this is just letting our reader know that we've taken out all of the middle letters. So that's what was used on official titles in the Roman world, hence the name titulus. And then on the other side, I'm going to put the XC. X is a CH sound in Greece, or in Greek. Go. Then the uppercase C is the sigma. And again, a little titulus. And this is Christ. Christos. And there's my nice little inscriptions. And I'm going to let that circle dry before I put in the rest of the halo. So now the halo line is dry and I can put in the cross of the halo. And to do that, I'm going to switch tools. I'm still using a ruling pen, but just by itself, not attached to the compass. And I'm going to use a ruler here, and I've already pre-measured where I want to place those and made little marks with a pencil. So it's just based on the design you're going for. But this ruler has a cork back, which is very important because I need it to sit on top of the surface. So when I use that ruling pen, I'm not getting paint down underneath the ruler and getting onto the gold leaf. So I'm going to very gently place my ruler. Go ahead and load my ruling pen. And very carefully, I'm going to start making those lines. There's one. And I'm stopping about 1/4 of an inch. I'm just going to bring it down slightly to make a secondary line there. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to turn it around and just do the same process on this side. There's 1, 2, oops, 2, and then now the top bar. Let's get that out of there. Oops. There's 1. 2. There we go. One. And 2. Go ahead and clean my ruling pen. And now I'm going to go back to that detail brush. And very carefully I'm going to go ahead and put in little flutes, little flares at the end and connect it to the circle of the halo. There's 1, 2. And there we go. I'm going to let these dry and then finish the rest of the embellishments. Next, I'm going to start on the embellishments. So what I want is to put little triangles that are going to be lapis lazuli gems in the halo. So what I've done is just drawn a little triangle with a Sharpie on this little scrap of wax paper. And that way I could line it up right in the center. And I'm going to take a ballpoint pen and I'm just going to go over that triangle and it's going to indent into the gold. And that way I know where to place my paint. On this side. And I'm just putting, moderate pressure. It's actually really easy to indent the gold before it's fully cured here. And one right up here. Go. There we go. So that's going to guide where I place my paint. So I'm going to start painting in the jewels here. And I'm going to use some ultramarine blue to go inside those triangles. There's one. And the gold might not be really safe to rest my hand, so I'm just going to put this little piece of leather there. You can use anything, but leather is very safe for gold. There's two. And three. Oops, there's a little spot up there. There we go. So I'm going to wash that blue paint out. And now I'm going to put in some pearls. I'm going to start with more of an off-white, because when these paints dry, I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting just to accentuate them, make them look more like jewels. But I'm going to put a dot at each corner of the lapis jewel, and then I'm going to put larger dots kind of framing that jewel. Go. On this side. And I'm just eyeballing the placement. It doesn't really need to be too exact here. And if the paint is repelling, I can always mix some soap into the paint, but this seems to be taking fairly well. And up here. Less space up here, but that's okay. And there we have it. So I'm going to let that dry and then do some really subtle little highlights just to make it look more like jewels. So I've let that initial layer of paint dry, and now I'm just going to put little dots of white, little white highlights in strategic areas. Get some white paint here. Just need a little bit of it. There we go. So I'm going to make a little highlight now on top of those off-white pearls to really finish up the effect of the jewel. So let's place those little dots there. And just these little nuanced details really make all the difference. There we go. There we are. Let's just do this side here. Cool. And now up here, up top, and I'm just going to mix a little bit of that blue into the white, just to create a light blue. I'm going to go ahead and just add some details to the blue gems. There we go. There we are. There we go. And I'm going to do another little highlight with the blue. But I'm going to get a little more white. Oops, let me grab some of that. Make a little lighter blue. There we go. And I'm just going to put this on two sides of the diamond to really get that jewel effect there. Maybe a little bit on the edge. There, I like that. Same thing on this side. And finally, up top. There we go. And as the paint has dried, I've noticed that my inscriptions look a tad bit thin, a tad bit anemic there. So I'm just going to take my little detail brush and just go ahead and give them, wherever they look a little too thin, I'm going to give it another pass. There we go. Just so they're very opaque and clear and crisp. There we are. Best not to drink a lot of coffee before you do these little embellishments. There. So there we are, my jeweled halo. And I'm going to go ahead and paint the sides when the icon is finished.